uh, dear senior members of our profession. I first of all would like to thank Dr. Prasad and the TOSACON for inviting me for this wonderful meeting here in Khammam. In fact, Dr. Prasad wanted me to be here from Friday onwards, but because of my own preoccupation with the profession, I was able to come only this morning around 8 o'clock. I landed, and Dr. Prasad called me, your talk is next, so I had to rush. Now, after the very effective talk on PFN, on trochanteric fractures, and how do you manage that, I'm going to talk on a simple talk why you should do a THR for an unstable trochanteric fracture. THR means it also involves the hemiarthroplasty. It's not moving. Now, goal in management for any trochanteric fracture in elderly, you all will agree that we have to mobilize them early. These are the implants which are time tested, and I do not contradict that these implants should not be used in managing the trochanteric fractures because they are widely accepted, the treatment of intertrochanteric fractures and pertrochanteric fractures, and their usage is proved beyond doubt. You can see one DHS which has been well taken care for the 4-part fracture, with a very good outcome of this fracture. This also appears to be well reduced, but in 3 months' time this has collapsed and the cutout of the screw is seen in the next X-ray. The other X-ray of an elderly person around 82 years old who has got a badly shattered upper end of the femur, which has got a comminution of the lateral wall of the trochanter also, and his canal is so wide. So what is the treatment for this hip, whether this is a treatment or whether if you are dealing with a lady who has got a very wide and a hollow head of the femur, whether these implants will be suffice. So what I was doing for this Jain patient was I did a distally fixing stem with a bipolar, and follow-up of 2 months and 6 months are shown with the X-ray where the patient could be ambulated from day 1. Now, problems of DHS has been well emphasized in literature, and the overall mechanical failure was 16.5% of cutting out of the implant from the femoral head, which has been well published in various articles. This article, which was published in 2002, shows that the most serious complication is cutout of the hip pin and femoral neck screw, and a considerable load on the hip pin is thought to facilitate the cutout. Proximal femoral nails are also not left out. It also has got a cutout of the lag screw in 7% in a poor, unstable intertrochanteric fractures with osteoporosis. So why the fixation fails has been well documented by Mr. Gottfried, where he has retrospectively analyzed 24 patients with an average age of 74. 22 were female, 2 were male. They all evaluated the pre-op and post-op X-rays. Lateral wall fracture was leading to collapse. Now, one example of a patient who had a negative type of an reduction of the medial calcar with a DHS in, you can see that there is an arrow which shows that after the fixation, the lateral wall which has not fractured, once you have reamed put it, you can see that there is an arrow which shows that there is a fracture. But when the fracture got collapsed, it abutted over the lateral wall and it healed, fortunately. But this is not true in all cases. This is one more example where this is a 4-part trochanteric fracture. This is the lateral wall, which shows that very thin wafer-like lateral wall. Once you have put the DHS, it got fractured. Now, an intertrochanteric fracture has become purely a subtrochanteric fracture with only fixation of a DHS screw proximally, and distally there are screws, but this has become totally unstable, which leads on to the failure of union of these fractures. It's my own patient whom I thought that after putting the DHS to cover the greater trochanter, I put a wiring in that, and in 4 months' time, there was a cutout, and you can see that the cutout head DHS is seen through the head of the femur when we opened up this fracture. So loss of fixation, loss of mobility, need for a reoperation, probably an arthroplasty. X-ray of my mother, who had a 4-part trochanteric fracture. She was 81 at that time, and she was a poor ambulator. So I did a distally fixing stem with wiring in the local area and ambulated immediately for her. This is post-op, immediate post-op. She is sitting, she is able to read papers, she is ambulated with the walker. Papers are there where primary arthroplasty is utilized for internal fixation for trochanteric fracture in elderly patients way back. These are the few of the Wall et al. In 1994 has said that elderly debilitated patient with an unstable trochanteric fractures, hemiarthroplasty is an acceptable alternate. Primary bipolar prosthetic arthroplasty offers better functional outcome in osteoporotic trochanteric fractures. So what are the criteria? You take Evans 3 or 4, osteoporosis sinks index less than 4, general condition not permitting weight-bearing mobilization, non-weight-bearing mobilization, multiple medical problems. The surgical approach is a little bit different. You open up, but like hemi replacement for the shoulder, you retain all the soft tissue attachment to the trochanter and the lesser trochanter, expose the neck through the fracture site. You can see that the identification of the great trochanter fracture is made out. Then you separate this great trochanter. You can identify the end-on view of the neck. With a corkscrew, you will be able to deliver the head out, and the rest of the procedure is very simple of doing the hemiarthroplasty, cemented or uncemented, depending upon the position, depending upon the general condition of the patient. So at the end, you have to wire the great trochanter, lesser trochanter, and patient can be mobilized immediately. Advantage for this is dissection is direct, easy. You retain all the soft tissues attached to the fracture fragment and less morbidity as far as the union is concerned. I'll show you one good example. It's an elderly lady had a well-fixed PFN. In 2 months' time, it cut through the head. It had a sweeping response on the acetabulum. You can see that it has created a pouch in the superior lateral quadrant. So the surgeon converted this into a total hip in 3 months' time. This was in November 2017. It was all right till December, and in January it got dislocated. When the patient got dislocated and it was suggested to have one more operation, then at that time the patient came to me and we were analyzing what are the reasons why it has happened, what is the important function, why this has got dislocated. It appeared that the cup orientation and the femoral stem orientation looked all right. When we opened up, the greater trochanter had no attachment of the gluteus. That is the reason why this has got dislocated. Version of the cup, version of the stem, everything was all right. So you should not leave the soft tissues which are attached to this great trochanter, lesser trochanter fragment devascularized. So be careful when you are doing the hemiarthroplasty or the total hip replacement. The soft tissues are retained to the great trochanter. So this hip was reduced. We just repaired the gluteus to the GT, rest for 4 weeks, ambulated, and she is doing well. One more patient with hemiarthroplasty. You can see that how she walks. I don't know whether this will run. That's how the lady walks, and she can do a very well good stair climbing. Now it's 7 years since surgery. Now all the fractures are not uniform. There may be posteromedial bone loss, which leaves difficulty in balancing the soft tissues. Stability is always at stake when you are having this, and dislocations are common. So soft tissue balance is difficult because of combination of the calcar. You can create a bony calcar with head, or use a longer neck length, or use a calcar replacement processes, or big size stem to make it more proud. Now, these are the calcar replacement processes. They are expensive. So what you can do is you can take the head which has been excised by you and refashion like this and put it over the upper end of the processes before you cement it. So example of that, we have cut it, we have temporarily fixed it, and then with the cementation. We have put this hemiarthroplasty. You can see that the arrow shows that there is a nice calcar which is formed on the medial side. What happens to these fragments? You can see in this particular example, they all get nicely incorporated within the bony fragment and they all heal in 2 years' time. Whether you use uncemented or cemented component for the stem, cemented is economical, useful for fixation of a wide osteoporotic canal. But there is a risk of transient hypotension, and if you are dealing with a patient who has got already cardiac problem, who has got renal failure, probably you can prefer an uncemented component. Example of a patient who had been like this for 1.5 years, when we opened up to balance this. Initially, this was the trial reduction, and we could distract it. The arrow shows the distraction, and you can see that this much of the proudness must be given so that you can get a soft tissue balance in this particular case. So we have cemented in that fashion, and then the trochanter was wired pre and post-op, which shows that you can very well ambulate these patients immediately. One more example where I have used, this shows that there is a nice posteromedial defect. I used the next, reversed it and put it impacted, and the uncemented component was put. You can see that the femoral offset is well maintained. If you are dealing with the old trochanteric fractures, then problems which you will find is difficulty in removal of the implants, broken screws in the canal, porotic bone underlying the plate, which will cause that there won't be any lateral wall at all, distorted proximal anatomy due to medialization of the distal fragment. A good example of a patient who is psoriatic arthropathy with medial bone loss. We chose to use a SROM stem, and that is how we could get a very nice reduction with a calcar replacement type of a process. This is his function. This was done almost 10 years ago. He is still alive, doing very well with this pediatrician who was operated way back in 2010, I think. She had this type of fracture which was fixed by my colleague in Madurai, and neck of the femur never united. So when you have got this problem, when you are reaming the medullary canal, you have to be very careful, because when you ream it, it will go out at the medial side of the shaft. So in this particular case, we used a SROM stem so that it could align all these fragments together, wired entirely, and that is her function. Not all hips have got smooth sailing. This is a 68 years old female, not a great ambulator, had a DCS plate and fixation by my senior mentor. Clinically, lab reports shows no infection. This was the first fixation was done by my colleague who was working with me in Government General Hospital. The patient had a non-union at the local site. She went and represented to my mentor, and while he was doing the surgery, he found that there is no lateral cortex at all. So he fixed it with the DHS with wiring and all. It looked all right in July 2004, but September 2014 it started bending, and the entire hip got dislocated. Reasons, we don't know why it got dislocated. At this stage, I took over, and I thought that I have done a wonderful operation, doing a long stem with wiring of all the porotic fragments so that she can get incorporated in that. But unfortunately, again, it dislocated. So I have to convert with a constrained cemented component of the acetabulum, and which is retained for the past 3 years with a good follow-up. So all cemented hybrid hips are mobilized at the earliest time with full weight bearing. Uncemented components are mobilized with partial weight bearing, later on with full weight bearing. What is against this surgery? This surgery is for a frail osteoporotic elderly lady with multiple medical problems. It's a big surgery. Mortality is up to 3%. If you have got complications of renal failure, ischemic heart disease, stroke, you have to talk to the relatives before you undertake the procedure. Use uncemented components for patients more than 70 years. In conclusion, prosthetic replacement in selected group of elderly patients with comminuted unstable intertrochanteric fractures need arthroplasty for their early mobilization. Retention of soft tissues to the fracture fragment results in good abductor power in most patients. Trochanteric non-union when treated with THA pose many surgical challenges which one should anticipate. I thank you for your kind attention.
Respected Chairperson, delegates, I would like to thank Dr. Hanuman, Dr. Prasad, and the organizing team for giving me an opportunity to present my work at this place. I'm going to talk on challenges in the management of floating knee and its long-term outcome. The very name floating knee itself is a challenge for any orthopedic surgeon across the globe, as they have a lot of factors, the kind of nature of injury and blood loss. There are so many factors which make the case very challenging. Is the hospital. I work in a place which is smaller than Khammam, a district place. This is the hospital. I would like to owe to my parents. My father, mother, both are doctors. My wife is a gynecologist. We all together work here. My father is the backbone of the hospital. He manages all casual emergency cases and the ICU care. And I'm the only orthopedic surgeon working in the hospital. Whatever cases I'm going to present today, 20% of the cases I wanted to refer to higher center. Because of my father, with the bold step of his, he wanted to retain them and we could give good results. As the moment you say floating knee, the floating is not so easy. It's only possible, this kind of floating is possible in salt lake called Uta. I'll try my level best to make this cases as simpler as possible so that you can go back and start performing this case at your own setup. Floating is nothing but the ipsilateral fractures of the femur and the tibia. They are results of high velocity trauma. They are also associated with life-threatening injuries like head injury, blunt trauma abdomen and chest injuries. Such injuries should be taken care. They are hemodynamically unstable. Adequate resuscitation should be performed before going for any kind of definitive treatment. Advanced life trauma support protocol should be strictly followed. Time has changed from early total care to the damage control, which helps in the avoiding the second hit phenomena, which reduces the further bleeding. Fraser has classified, as we all know, the floating knee classification. Ran et al. Has tried to modify the classification and tried to add the impact on patella and the complexity of the articular fractures. The moment the articular fractures, it becomes the moment the complex articular fracture comes in a floating knee case, it becomes very challenging to any surgeon, as because of its multifragmentary and the kind of presentation it comes with. Now, which patients are benefited against the damage control or orthopedics versus early total care? It's still yet to be clarified because the time has changed, and with time people have shifted to damage control versus early total care in this kind of floating knee cases, because these floating knee cases, they just don't come with floating knee, they also are associated with other limb injuries and the life-threatening injuries. Especially hemodynamically unstable patients, they require early damage control orthopedics. Patients with associated with head injury, abdominal trauma and chest trauma, they also come into the damage control orthopedics. Now, if you are planning for early total care, serum bicarbonate levels are the indicator for hypoperfusion in early total care cases. Treatment should be individualized. We should not try to do a rapid definitive skeletal stabilization versus potential life-threatening risk of systemic complications such as fat embolism, acute lung injuries or multi-organ failure. Now, what is the optimum time for surgery? It's a very controversial. Still, there is no strict guidelines or any kind of guidelines where there is an optimum time of surgery, as we do not know which fractures need emergency care and which needs a delayed fixation. Now, sequence to be adopted in treating patients with multisystem injuries, even this has not been very much clearly mentioned in the literature. Information reported is contradictory and makes it very difficult to determine an optimum window. In my case series, I have opted within 12 to 48 hours time to go for early total care. It is very essential to consider lesions affecting other organs in order to synchronize their treatment with the fixation of the floating knee fractures. What does this mean? The patients comes with an abdominal injury with hemoperitoneum secondary to splenic rupture. They used to saw a triad of death. Triad of that death is nothing but decompensated case where which is secondary to excessive bleeding, hypothermia, and acidosis, which leads to triad of death. The correct time to treat a fracture depends on the appropriate resuscitation. What are the markers of appropriate resuscitation? Response to are serum lactate levels below 2.5, base deficit level, diuresis, pulse rate, and blood pressure. Now, external fixator can be used in hemodynamically unstable patients or patients with head injury or abdominal injury as a temporary stabilizer, and which can be converted into definitive fixation either in 8 to 10 days, or delayed fixation, delayed definitive care can be done at the 4 to 6 weeks once the soft tissue settles down. What are the priorities in the floating knee injuries? We should try to understand the priorities in floating knee injuries, as we should not hurry up try to fix the fixation fractures. First is to save the patient of life. Life is the most important thing to be taken care, which at times we try to overlook and try to hurry up and try to mess up the things. The operating room should not exceed more than 2 hours. Within the surgical windows, open fractures should be temporarily fixed, stabilized. Upper limb fractures can be stabilized with splints. Negative pressure therapies plays a crucial role. Procedures lasting for more than 6 hours are particularly dangerous, as they are associated with higher rates of acute respiratory distress syndrome and multi-organ failure. What are the factors associated with adverse outcomes? Multiple long bone fractures, pelvic trauma with hemorrhagic shock, surgical time exceeding more than 6 hours, pulmonary artery pressure which goes beyond 6 millimeter of mercury. So what is distracting factors? We all the time try to look at the limb with the floating knee cases, and we miss out a lot of other things because of the swollen limb, and because of the pain intensity is so much so high that patient doesn't appreciate the smaller fractures or the other smaller injuries. So second survey should not be underestimated, and that's what the standard teaching says. After the admission, next day also the clinical examination has to be conducted, and specific X-rays or CT scan has to be asked for to avoid any kind of missed injuries. The definitive treatment either can be done, the fixator can be changed within 8 to 10 days, or it can be delayed. The stage at which the definitive fixation of the fracture should be performed after a temporary one with external fixation is a controversial subject. But in general, this will depend on patient's general condition. If patient is well resuscitated, it can be converted early, or it can be waited till the soft tissue heals. Now, coming to the treatment aspect, type 1 floating injury, the standard treatment is as both shaft of femur and tibia is involved, intramedullary nailing. Type 2 floating injuries, I'll be talking in detail because it involves intra-articular fractures which needs open reduction, anatomical fixation, and a stable anatomical plates it requires. Now, femoral nailing is performed first while the tibia is temporarily stabilized. What does this mean? Now, we should try to nail the tibia first. It leads to soft tissue damage for the femur part and might lead to fat embolism because of the femur fracture. So, how can you temporarily stabilize? Either you can put a below knee slab or an external fixator, and I usually put a high tibial Steinmann pin and use a traction table to do a femoral nailing. Ligamentous instability, I'll be talking in detail once I come to the flow chart. Now, this is a flow chart. Now, if the patient is stable, you can go for definitive fixation. If there is a diaphyseal fractures, if you get an MRI, there is no signs of ligamentous lesion, go for nailing. If there is a ligamentous lesions, off late with in the recent days, they are not the people have started doing arthroscopy in the same stage if the patient is stable, and try to do whatever is necessary other than doing it at second stage. If patient is unstable, external fixation, which can be converted to the definitive fixation once the soft tissue heals. If it is an epiphyseal fracture, it requires open reduction, internal fixation. Coming to the case one, is a young male who has comminuted fractures of the shaft of femur and tibia. It's a floating knee case. He had even a very bad heel pad avulsion, as you can see here, with an open calcaneum fracture. He was hemodynamically unstable, so external fixator was applied, which was converted on 8th day. Both nailing was done. Subsequently, it healed well, and he got a good functional outcome. For 15 years male, mid-shaft fracture with proximal tibia fracture. Initially, I thought of nailing both. Then, the moment I took a knee X-ray, the physis was the tuberosity physis was open. So, avoided nailing and did a proximal tibia plating, open reduction and plating. First, the tibia nailing was done. Subsequently, it united well, and it got a good functional outcome. Now this is where the challenge comes. type C2 supracondylar fracture with mid-shaft femur. Now the standard teaching says fix the femur first, then the tibia next. But in this case, what I would suggest is try to fix the tibia first, because the moment you fix a complex intra-articular fracture, then you start bending the knee and start doing a nailing, it might jeopardize the fixation. So if there is a metaphyseal metaphysis with intra-articular fracture, we can fix the tibia first. Though it is very challenging, because to bend the knee, the bending is happening at the fracture side than the knee joint. So I have nailed in this case, tibia nailing was done first, and then the femur fixation was done. I would like to come in detail about the approaches and the tips and tricks of the distal femur fractures in the coming talks. Here the intra-articular reduction was fixed. ACL bony avulsion was there, which was put back, as you can see here. This is the bony avulsion which was put back, and the reduction clamp was used. Intra-articular CC screw has been CC screw was used for intra-articular fixation, and you can see my clamps are put in such a way that it facilitates the distal femur, distal plate to go without any hindrance in the reduction. Is a video here? No, this is even about the rehabilitation, we'll be talking in detail. This surprisingly, this patient was doing this amount of knee bending on first POD itself. Rehabilitation after a good fixation is very important to get an external functional outcome. Otherwise, we see immobilization for longer duration leads to stiffness of the knee. This is a post-op X-rays. Here, because of the medial comminution, double plating was done on the day one itself, and tibia nailing is an external functional outcome, and there is no extensor lag. This is the final follow-up at 1 year. This is a floating knee, very shattered type C3 fracture with proximal tibia fracture. Femur jetting out from the medial aspect of the thigh. Early total care was planned after 48 hours after resuscitating the patient. This was the intra-articular picture. This is the post-op. Here, as you see, on the proximal tibia, I tried to plate the proximal tibia through the same approach. There was a lot of skin issues here, and ended up with, this was a post-op fixation, ended up with skin necrosis. Local flap was raised, but at the end of the day, he got a good results. So one more floating knee. Here, similarly, the shaft was jetting out medially, type C2 fracture with the proximal tibia fracture, with even tibial spine was avulsed from the bed. You can see the open fracture. This was the incision which was planned for me. The dotted marked lines are the incision. What I do is, when we receive an open fracture in the casualty, I give a thorough, with a femoral block, I give a thorough lavage in the casualty itself and do a primary closure. And again, second look can be given in the operating room. This is the intra-articular fixation. Now you can see a small bony spike has gone and pressing the spine, and a K-wire being passed through and through the substance of the spine, tibial spine. A 4 mm CC screw is holding the tibial spine, followed by plating. Now, if you can see, there is no separate incision taken from the proximal tibia. Both MIPO was done, but through the same incision, a lateral as well as a medial low profile plate were being used. Distally, two separate incisions are being used for screw fixation. Now, if you see, in this case, your 5 mm proximal locking plate was used, and here raft plate of the opposite side was being used. So both the plates were being done through the same incision. It was 2 years follow-up. You can see it cross-leg. It is a final union. And even the spine, tibial spine looks well consolidated. Now, here, this floating knee which has open tibia fracture and soft tissue was not great. So there is no hurry to do any fixation, early definite fixation. Tibial fixator was applied, and primary plating was done for distal femur. So second stage, fibulectomy, plating and bone grafting was done. It's got a functional outcome. Now with the time I realized it goes for late varus collapse. So in these days I'm doing double plating for distal femur. This is one more case where you can see shattered proximal tibia with very bad soft tissue injuries. Now the moment you see this kind of soft tissue injuries, we should not hurry up. Let the soft tissue heal, then the tibia can be fixed. Distal femur was, tibia fixator was applied and distal femur was fixed. Tibial spine was fixed. The intra-articular part should be taken care on the day one itself of the tibia. You can see external fixator was put, and the fibular strut was used for the tibia. subsequently it healed well. It's one more floating knee with above elbow amputation. Here I used the distal humerus to replace the distal femur. Subsequently, he had a lot of problems, infections, was converted to XFIX, virus at the distal femur, which was compensated by excess valgus of the tibia. Eventually got a straight limb. Now he walks full weight bearing without any support. This is the case which was done way 7 years back when I started my career. He doesn't have absolute movements at the knee. I asked for quadriceps plasty as a second stage procedure. Thank you.